Wrappery housing. So with that, we're going to talk about what is Wrappery housing, right? So Wrappery housing, let me get set up so I can see myself. Wrappery housing is basically an evidence-based approach to end homelessness as quickly as possible for families and individuals. When you think about Wrappery housing, you can think of a trampoline. You know, we're giving them that leap, hopefully. We're providing the financial assistance and the short-term services so that they can quickly return to housing and so that they can be stable. So it is that subsidy and that case management, and those together equals Wrappery housing. There are 3 core components of Wrappery housing. The first is housing identification. So let's find a unit for the individual. There's a lot more that goes into that. I'm going to go into detail, but also it is the rent and move-in assistance. That's the financial assistance. And then lastly is the case management and the services, providing in-home case management, linking to services, providing those wraparound supports that goes along with the housing. So when you think of Wrappery housing, as well as all of our other housing programs, you should think about housing first. It is definitely a housing first model. And housing first is basically the belief that housing is a basic necessity that must be prioritized before an individual can pursue other personal goals and work towards improving their quality of life. Oftentimes we hear case managers speak of, you know, they're not ready to be housed, right? They don't have employment, they're actively using, they don't have any income, they haven't been to a doctor in years, they don't have any family supports, and they want them to focus on those things first. But housing readiness doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. People tried it, but there's many areas where someone can fail. Instead, we believe in housing first. So we're taking someone from homelessness, we're housing them, and then once they have that basic need met, then they're able to work on, you know, obtaining employment, getting income, working on their relationships with others, building their social supports, and then they get to a place where they can become stable. So we're going to go into more detail about that, but just remember that it is all about housing first. Housing readiness does not exist. It is not something that will cause an individual to become successful. So housing first is basically based off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that where you can see at the bottom, the psychological needs, that's the foundation. Those are all essential. So when we get someone in our Wrappery housing programs, they're obviously breathing, you know, they have access to food, maybe not a large amount, but they have food, they have water, they have some type of clothing on their body, they're sleeping, maybe not the best of sleep, but they're sleeping. So all of those needs are being met besides shelter, right? So once we get to shelter, that last missing part of their basic needs, then they're able to work on their higher needs, right? So we are really, as we often say, we're building someone up. We truly are building them up with this Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're building them up. We're taking care of the physiological needs, safety and security, love and belonging, self-esteem, and then self-actualization. But it starts with having to take care of the foundation first. And that's what the housing piece is. So Wrappery housing is a lot of different things. As I already said, it is a housing first practice, but it's also client driven. And client driven meaning the client is in the driver's seat. We're there to assist, we're there to support, but it's based off of their desires, their hopes, their behaviors. Oftentimes we may be the backseat drivers, you know, kind of navigating, making sure that they're in the right direction, but it's up to them. Wrappery housing is just enough assistance. It's not a lifetime, you know, kind of program like some of our other permanent supportive housing is. It's not a, we're gonna do 100% for 5 years. It's just enough assistance to get someone the support and the assistance that they need so that they can bounce back and hopefully land on their feet. Also, Wrappery Housing is housing retention focused. We often say we want to house people as quickly as possible, but it doesn't end there. We want to house them as quickly as possible, but more so we want to make sure that they stay housed. So we want to make sure that they're able to retain their housing so that they learn the skills and they get to a place where they can become self-sufficient. We're going to go into more detail. Rockery Housing is also strengths-based. You know, it is based off of what works for them. What are they good at? And even if they're not able to come up with their strengths as case managers, it's your role to kind of help them figure out what their strengths are. Everyone has a strength. So often some people say, well, they don't have any strengths. Everyone has some type of strength. So with this, it is empowering them, helping them identify their strengths, figuring out what worked for them in the past so that we can continue with that so that they can be successful again. It's also being trauma informed. That's something that we hear about often, and there's a lot that goes into being trauma informed, but basically it is knowing that individuals have some type of trauma, and that trauma can affect how they exist, how they operate, how they function, how they may respond to services, and you just want to be careful with that for safety concerns for yourself as well as for the individual, and always have that in the back of your mind so that you can move forward with that, as well as being culturally sensitive. That is knowing that not everyone's the same. Not everyone has the same worldviews. Not everyone has the same background or beliefs or ethics, but being sensitive to that and taking that into consideration so that you can move forward. So with saying all of that, do you all believe that Wrappery Housing is for everyone? I know some people are muted, but do you think Wrappery Housing is for everyone, or is it only for just like a few folks that it may work for? I don't see any head movements or anything. Let me go down my list.
I also just want to chime in and say that you guys could also use the chat feature as well.
Okay, so I will help you all out. Wrappery Housing is for everyone. We use Wrappery Housing interventions with everyone. Why? Because
looks like we're having some technical difficulties. Amber seems to have frozen.
maybe all they needed to.
Amber,
yes.
you froze for a few seconds. So the last thing we heard you say was, yes, it is for everyone. So could you, I'm sorry, restart your explanation? I apologize.
Okay, thank you. All right, where was I? Yes, Rockery Housing is for everyone. Why is it for everyone? It is because we don't know who is going to be successful and who's not going to be successful. Clients surprise us at all times. Once someone gets that last piece of their basic need, that housing, that may be all they needed so that they can thrive, right? So we're going to give them the intervention and see how they do, right? There's also no assessment for client resiliency. We don't know how they're going to respond in advance. We just have to do the interventions, give them the housing, give them the support, have with the goal of, we want the best outcome, but there's no assessment. We don't know going into it. And it's also not a one size fits all. Some may be successful, some may not. It's based off of the person, it's client driven. So why do we focus on Wrappery Housing? Why is Wrappery Housing something that we push? and we encourage. It is because rapid rehousing is successful. Studies have been done that shows that individuals that have exited emergency shelters and transitional housing were at least 4 times more likely to become homeless again than individuals that were in rapid rehousing programs. Connecticut alone has a 94% success rate. So that's 63 out of 1,004 rapid rehousing households that were exited to permanent housing, only 63 returned to homelessness within a year. So that's very good. It's very successful, as well as it costs less money. So the success rate is high, the expense rate is lower. So rapid rehousing is definitely a win in all areas. Right, so that's just a little background in it, but I went over the core components. We're going to go into more details about the core components. I'm trying to be mindful of my time because I know I have a lot of slides. So I'm going to talk a little fast, but the first core component is housing identification. Right, so what is involved in housing identification? It is so much more than just saying, here's an apartment. We wish it were that simple, but it is not. So you have to match a client to a landlord and property that meets their needs. Matching meaning making sure it works for them. You know, if you have a client that experiences a lot of anxiety and maybe they have a fear of heights, you may not want to put them in a building that is full of people and they're on a 10th floor. If you have someone that may have some compliance issues, you may want to put them with the landlord that is kind of understanding and really willing to work with you. If someone is kind of new in their sobriety, you don't want to put them in an area that is it has a lot of drug activity. So making sure it's a match and it meets their needs. And you also want to assist the client with setting realistic expectations. Sometimes our clients get very excited, you know, they get to look for an apartment, but they may be looking for a granite countertop in central air. That is nice, but that's not going to happen with the FMR that we have to work with. So finding out what it is that they want and help them to kind of have those realistic expectations so it works for all. You want to help them with finding the landlords, with calling the landlords, viewing the apartments, negotiating landlords for waiving the fees, background checks, not doing looking at their credit score, and also helping them complete applications. Some may need the assistance, some may not, but you will know who will need that assistance. And helping them through the whole lease signing process, you know, making sure that the lease has the correct information in there, the dollar amount is correct, and there's nothing odd in the lease. Sometimes in our programs, rapid housing programs, or any supportive housing program, landlords like to throw in other things because they think our population needs to have a different set of rules. And those are fair housing concerns. So paying attention to that and making sure that everything in the lease is appropriate, and helping them navigate through the whole process and they understand what the lease is, what they're signing. So all of that, there's a lot that's involved in housing identification, but what it is not is just simply giving your clients a list of apartments for them to call on their own and to report back to you. It's a process that requires work on both ends. I also don't believe that, you know, case managers should just do all of the work. Some of our people are completely able to look for some, or at least show you what they may be interested in. So having them be involved as well, but it's a team effort. And with housing identification, do not count out shared housing, especially now. Shared housing, you know, it's not something that people utilize very often, but it really should be. There's a lot of benefits that's involved in it. There's financial benefits. You're having maybe 2+ individuals in a unit, and a 2-bedroom apartment is a lower rate than having 2 separate 1-bedroom apartments, right? There's an interpersonal benefit. It is someone may not feel comfortable or be ready to live on their own. Someone's playing around with our tool here. Someone may not feel comfortable to live on their own. They may want others there. You know, they come from, for some, the comfort of being in the shelter and having others around them, and being by themselves is too much. So that is a benefit for some, as well as the provider benefits. When you have shared housing, your leases are separate. It is a business arrangement. You're there to help them navigate who's going to pay for utilities or how it's going to be broken down to. You're there to offer mediation. And the individuals get to choose, you know, who do they want to live with? They may have a friend in mind. So that's housing identification, but before you even get that, how do you even get your landlords? This is a really essential part. As we say, we want to house people as quickly as possible, but how do you get your landlords? And with that, what's most important is developing and maintaining your relationships with your landlord. You know, recruiting your landlords continuously, even if you don't have someone that you have to house. But do it before. It should be a continuous process. Don't wait until you have someone that you have to house. The more partnerships with landlords you develop, the more opportunities you have to rapidly house your participants. And there's a lot of different techniques that people use. I'm just going to go into a few. Word of mouth is huge. Although you may have someone on your caseload that you may have to house, it should be a team effort. You know, ask your peers. Do you have a landlord? I have a client that lives in East Hartford. Do you have a landlord over in that area? Do you know any landlords who has a 1-bedroom available? So see what's out there, communicate. Also, marketing materials. This is not an easy sell, but it makes it easier when you go into it and you're organized and you're prepared. So having your marketing materials, having your landlord letter, your brochure, a landlord benefit checklist, really trying to get the buy-in from the landlord, explaining what the program is, and getting them to believe in it, right? Posting ads, responding to ads, landlord outreach, always on the lookout for landlords, being creative. As I said, shared housing is one way of being creative. Attending or holding a landlord networking event, developing partnerships with other organizations, and having a pitch. You know, really go into it knowing what you're going to say. So with that, and with having a pitch, there's a lot of selling points. And one is, you know, a landlord benefits checklist, kind of just going down a list, telling landlords what they can get out of it. Yes, you're helping us also, but you can also get out of having to eliminate advertising costs, because once they house with a Rockery housing program, then if they have a vacant unit, they can just give a call. We always have people that need to be housed, so they don't have to advertise in public areas when we always have someone that we can put in one of their units. Also, there's damage and security deposits. The clients have access to time-limited subsidies. You know, at first it used to be 6 months, but sometimes it can be a little bit more, but it is a subsidy. There is a backing that person has. They have the support, and financial support. Also, it's a huge benefit to landlords that they're receiving case management services. So they have case managers in the unit that is there to help someone with budgeting, knowing what's going on in the unit, making sure that they understand what's going on their lease. Also, they're attached to needed services. But in the event that something does go wrong, we can rehouse that client. That is a selling point. You know, landlords are all about money. It's a selling point that we can rehouse the client to prevent the cost of eviction, right? And then we can fill those units with new clients to prevent months of the unit sitting vacant. Also, there is problem prevention through regular home visits. You're in the home, so you're able to see what's going on. You're able to see if maybe if there's someone else that's residing in the unit that's not on the lease. You're able to see if there is any damage that's going on, if there's a lot of traffic. So you're in the unit kind of being a support also to the landlord, another set of eyes. So if something is going on, you can kind of prevent it before it gets out of hand. And then you're also a neutral party to mediate problems. Of course, we advocate for the individuals in our program, but we also have to hold them accountable and set the expectations. And we also want to make sure that we're able to retain our relationship with the landlord as well. So you can be there to mediate if there's any potential problems. And lastly, kind of work on their heart, kind of touch on their heart and just let them know that the satisfaction that comes along with helping someone, the fact that they're taking someone from homelessness and housing them and willing to work with them, there's great satisfaction that goes along with that. So getting a landlord is extremely important, but I think probably what's a little bit more important is be able to retain that landlord, right? Having that good provider and landlord relationship so that you can continue to work with that landlord. Because if you have the good working relationship with them, then it makes it that much easier to use them again when you have someone else that you want to house. So with that, there is ongoing communication, having check-ins with the landlord, seeing if there's anything that's going on, seeing if there's anything that you need to address, rental payments, making sure that you're submitting your rental payment requests in a timely fashion. If there's anything that pops up or any concerns with their rental payments, you're responding to their phone calls, you're communicating with them. That is extremely important with landlords. You all received all the phone calls. You know that that's always an issue. You're doing your case management, you're doing your constant housing inspection. It's not only when the paperwork is done, but you're making sure the unit is in good working condition at all times. And you're setting the expectations and the accountability for your client as well as for the landlord. Sometimes landlords feel as though because someone is in a Wrappery housing program, they don't have to work with the client. They don't have to address if there's any concerns. They don't have to report if someone didn't pay their rent. They don't have to have a lease of their own. But you want to say what the expectations are for the landlord as well as the client. And then working together to have some type of resolve. If there's a problem that comes up, how can we work it out? How can we figure it out? Even if someone is doing a lot of damage where they haven't paid their rent in a long time and they want to evict them, you want to work it out together. Maybe you can just rehouse someone. So that was a lot, but before I move on to core component number 2, does anyone have any questions or input about housing identification? I don't know what this blue line is on my screen. I think someone drew on there. I wish I knew how to erase it, but okay. So we're gonna go ahead and go to core component 2 if no one has anything.
I'm sorry, I was trying to talk. I guess I wasn't unmuted. I just had 2 quick questions.
Okay.
So I know that you said that we can rehouse clients to prevent evictions. I wasn't aware of that, and I recently had a conversation with the landlord, and she was seeming like she was going to be open to working with our program. And then, her one question was, well, if it gets to that, will you rehouse them? And I told her no, because this is news to me. I've been here, not too long, I've been here 6 months, and I've never been told that we can rehouse someone. In fact, I've been told that, if a client gets evicted, that's reason to terminate them from the program. So I guess I'm just curious, like what the process would be, or if there's a contact person for, just for record purposes, so I would know who to or how to get that process started. And then my other question was, when you were talking about the lease, I was just wondering if you knew if there were any guidelines or rules in terms of late fees on the lease. I recently moved in a family of 6, and the building actually sold a couple weeks after we moved them in. And so the new landlord came, and his lease was crazy. He's asking for a $150 late fee. He's got all of these charges there. And I'm just wondering, like, if there are any rules as far as, what landlords can charge for late fees and stuff like that.
I'm trying to think. I don't know.
That would be according to the client's lease, wouldn't it, Amber?
Well, yes, but she's asking if the landlord, if there's any guidelines, like a limit for the landlord to have where they can't ask for late fees more than, $200 or something like that. I don't know if there's anything specific that says you can't ask for more than $200 or anything like that. Usually it's a percentage. Some do that, but there's nothing that really says that it can't be more than 150. It can't be more than 200. I think going into that, that's where the negotiation comes in. That's where, you're looking at it closely and you're saying, okay, we need to work on this. This is too much. If someone is a day late, you want to charge $200, we can't do that, and try to really negotiate with them on that. You also want to make sure that their lease is standard, and it's not something that they're saying, because this person is in this program, I'm going to charge this X amount of money. It's not something different from what they would do for everyone else. But also, as far as rehousing someone, really, if the landlord is willing to let someone out of their lease, it is an option to rehouse them. I've done it in my programs. Believe you can maybe speak better to that. You can rehouse them. It also depends on the subsidy. Are they going to give back the security deposit? If we are helping them to avoid eviction, that may be a negotiation. Okay, I'll get them out of your way. Give me the security deposit so I can move them somewhere else. Right? That is a win-win in both situations, for the landlord as well as for the individual.
And what I would add to that, Amber, is particularly in instances where you put someone into a unit thinking that it's going to be affordable for them in the long term, but whatever happens, their income doesn't increase at the rate that you had initially anticipated, etc. I think that's a real conversation that you need to have with people. It's not, you can rehouse people not just to avoid eviction, but certainly if, as the person continues in the program, it's just not going to be a sustainable unit to them, you can always have that conversation with the tenant about looking for a new apartment.
That was helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, anything else before we go to core component 2? What's my time? All right, so core component number 2, rent and move-in assistance. So that's the financial assistance, right? You're providing short-term help to households to pay for housing, and that's paying the security deposit, the move-in expenses, the rent, utilities, if there's arrears, if they're not able to get utilities in their name, and maybe it's about $50 or so, you're pointing them in the right direction so that they can take care of that. So it's not a prevention for them to get their own apartment and have utilities in their name. And it's also any other costs that may help them obtain and sustain housing. So when you are thinking about housing someone, it doesn't end right at, you know, getting them in the apartment. We also want to make them feel comfortable. So that includes making sure that they have a bed. You know, you put a referral in for them to have bed, they have towels, they have bedding, they have pots and pans. You don't want to simply just give them a roof over their head, right? Because then they're still living as though they're homeless. You want to give them the tools so that they can make that a home and they can live comfortably. That's when that basic need is actually met. And then it's also individualized and flexible according to each client's needs. The minimum assistance is financial and housing supports necessary to be provided for the shortest period of time possible. We want to stabilize them. We want to get them on their feet, but it's also knowing when to discharge. It's not meant to be a long-term type of assistance. We're getting them off their feet. We're seeing that they have the tools that they need. We're giving them the support that they need. And then we're going to move towards discharge because we think they are in a position that they're able to sustain their housing. Also, rent and move-in assistance, there should not be any requests for any financial assistance prior to a unit passing the Hqs inspection, and that the lease packet is completed. Sometimes I have seen, you know, clients kind of get into a unit, a landlord, they might have a side conversation with a landlord. The landlord lets them have a key and you're requesting financial assistance, but no inspection was done. There's no lease. All the other documentation is not complete. That should not be before you have the inspection and the entire lease packet completed. Right. I know ACT is going to go into more about that whole move-in and the rent and the subsidy and all of that. But I'm going to go into case management and services and the goals behind the case management and services. Sorry. The goals with the case management and services, our goal is to focus on solving the housing crisis. We want to get them housed and we want to keep them housed, right? It's also giving them, I'm moving my screen, sorry. It's also giving them the support and the help that they need. You're helping to resolve the issues that they may have. You're connecting them to community resources and services. It's not about you just providing case management services, but it's also providing wraparound services, you know, connecting them, linking them to others that can be there to assist them as well. If they need mental health treatment, substance abuse, connect them to Social Security, employment, whoever, wraparound services so that they have what they need. But our ultimate goal of providing case management and services is to get an individual to a point where they can become self-sufficient, getting them to the point where they no longer need us. They don't need us, and they don't need a financial assistance, right? So it's short term. And short term is just enough assistance to become successful. Self-sufficiency, build them up, provide them with the skills, with the tools that they need so that they can become self-sufficient and no longer need us. And with that, I spoke a little bit about some of these before, but I'm going to go into more detail. It is remembering that case management services is client-driven. So that is the client directs when, where, and how often case management meetings occur. Of course, you can encourage them to meet with you more often, but it is client-driven. The housing stabilization plan is also written in the client's first person and come from the client. That is something that I really can't stress enough. So often you see case managers may have a housing stabilization plan at the first meeting of someone. How is that possible when it's supposed to come from the person, right? If this is a plan that an individual has for themselves, this is their goals, right? And it's person-centered. So there's no way that you can complete this before you meet someone. There's no way that you can complete this before having the input of your client, right? Also, client-driven, meaning you're allowing them to have the space that they need to test their problem solving, especially with the landlord, but you're also there and willing to assist to mediate the issues if necessary. And it's client-driven, so it's based off of their behavior. So take those challenges that may arise and use them as teaching moments so that they can become a good tenant. Teach them how to, if they have an issue with someone across the hall, if the person's playing music so loudly, show them how to have a conversation with them. A lot of times you'll get clients and they say, after being there for a few months, I want to move. And then you find out after you ask them a little bit, it's because of a simple issue with another tenant and they don't know how to address it. So use those challenges as teaching moments. And then you're going to prepare them to be good tenants. Strengths-based, you're going to help them identify their own strengths and successes in their past that can help them with this crisis. And you're going to support and trust that people want to succeed, even if they're not able to verbalize it, even if it seems as though they don't care. We're still going to come from a positive place. And we're still going to trust that they want to succeed. And you're going to do this by providing positive encouragement so that they believe that they want to succeed. So it's something that they start believing in. They believe in themselves. We're going to build them up, that hierarchy of needs. We got the foundation, and now we're going to build them up and work on everything else. Also, trauma-informed, emphasize the emotional and physical safety. We're going to establish trust, and that takes building your rapport with them. Rapport is so important. Someone being successful, a lot has to do with the rapport that they have with their case managers. They have to trust that you truly want to work with them and you want the best for them. And then when they believe that, they're willing to work with you a little bit more. They take a lot from what you put out, right? They may not believe in themselves yet, but if you're empowering them, if you are showing them that they have control over this and you're motivating them, then they're going to be more trusting and willing to work towards that as well. You are going to, my thing's in a way I can't see. Okay, you're going to minimize the chances of re-traumatizing, knowing what trauma that they went through and making sure that it doesn't happen again, doing whatever you can to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And you're going to limit their exposure to future trauma. Say if they experienced trauma, maybe they were sexually abused and they were always surrounded by a lot of men or women, and they felt alone. You don't want to put them in a similar situation, right? Because that can re-traumatize them. So you just want to be mindful of that. And then housing focus. The focus is always on housing stabilization. They're the owners of the plan. The plan needs to work for them. It is not about us. It is not about what we want for them. Oftentimes we want more for them or we want differently than what they want for themselves. But we have to figure out how to get that buy-in. How do we get them to want this for themselves? And that's with, starting from what has worked previously, explore with them. How were they able to be in society and be successful previously? What did they do? What did their day look like? What do they do to keep themselves occupied, keep themselves productive? Because once you know that information, you're able to increase the odds of it working again. Utilize other community and state resources, link them to services as early and quickly as possible to provide those wraparound services around them. And with it being housing focused, as I said before, it's not just housing someone as quickly as possible, but it's more so about retaining their housing. And in order to do that, there's a lot that goes into that, right? sometimes people are not able to say what goals they may have for themselves, right? But because this is a housing program, if you don't have any other goal, then your goal should be to focus on being compliant with your lease, because that's what it's going to take for you to remain housed. So being compliant with their lease, there's an education component involved in that. Make sure that they know what their lease consists of. Make sure that they know what the rules are, what the expectations are, and have the conversation with how are they going to pay for their rent to maintain their housing. The idea, it's short-term assistance, so it's going to eventually end. So what are you going to do so that you can pay for your rent on your own? The plan also needs to be SMART, having SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time limited. Put everything right out there, because once you know exactly what it is, it's easier to work on and achieve. Focus on short-term goals. This is a short-term program, so you want goals that are attainable during that time. And the plans should be updated regularly. You do not have to wait until your documentation due date. It should be updated regularly. As new things arise, you need to incorporate that into the plan. If someone was not employed when you first created their plan, if they obtained employment, that needs to be updated, because those are new goals that come along with that, right? Making sure that they're going to work on time, that they're communicating, and they have the new rental portion that they have to pay for. And then also the intensity increases if needed. If someone is showing you signs that they are struggling, you may have them initially on seeing them on a monthly basis, but some people need more. They need more, especially initially when you're trying to get them housed. Monthly does not work. It may need to be weekly. Some people may need to have contact with you every 2 days. So it's based off of an individual and what they need so that they can become successful.
Before you move on, Amber, we have a couple questions in the chat box.
Okay.
First thing is that Eduardo sent a nice little thing that he found on the internet. I don't know the accuracy of this, so we need to probably check with Fair Housing on this.
Mhm.
But he said that he found something on the internet that late fees cannot exceed $10 or 5% of the overdue amount, whichever amount is leased.
Okay.
So if yeah, we'll check with Fair Housing and we'll get an answer back to you guys. And then Wendy Epstein wants to know if we can offer financial assistance for things that the client needs, like household items like a bed or a table.
Now, every program also usually has their program budget, right? So every program has some type of program fees. When I was a program manager, I used those that dollar amount to pay for any other things. But with there being so many programs out there where you can put referrals in that will completely give you a full apartment, you really shouldn't have to pay too much money financially. There's a lot of free financial supports, as well as maybe paying about $100. I forget, it's been a while, and then they can completely furnish the whole unit. So there's a lot of supports and resources out there where it's not all out of pocket, not at all. Programs do not have the finances to pay for all of that.
And just maybe Lee can just speak to the fact, I know that we can't use ESG funds in this way, but maybe there are other funds that we could use. I mean, the majority of rapid rehousing funds are ESG funds, but there are some alternate funds from DMIS, ODFC. But Lee, could you just, or Kara, if either one of you are still on the line, would you just be able to speak a little bit more to that? Okay. Well, I'm pretty sure, I know we can't use ESG funds in this way. So it would really be up to the individual program and the program's resources and contract to really talk to your program manager to look at those contracts to understand how your money can be spent. I know that ESG can't buy furniture. We can pay for moving expenses and utilities, but furniture is not an allowable expense to my knowledge.
Right. Yep. See what resources are out there. I know Journey Home, I believe, I hope they still have it. They have a lot with just great, pots and pans and beds and anything possible to make someone really comfortable in their unit.
But that's just for the Hartford can. So
That's just for Hartford.
So this is a statewide meeting. So Wendy, what program are you at? Wendy, if you want to respond in the chat and let us know what part of the state you're in, if we find any resources in that area, we'll make sure you're aware of them. Okay, we can move on.
List together on that. I don't know where I was. So take all of that into consideration, but also be mindful of the impact that conflict and crisis can have on someone. So it can impede their ability to be hopeful and confident, to clarify their goals, to say what it is that they want for themselves, to effectively advocate for themselves, to take back control and have positive interactions with people. So just because someone is, they do all these things, that doesn't mean that they don't want to be successful. You just have to take that into consideration and still empower them, still build them up, still make sure that they know that they are the makers of their own decision and work alongside them as a partner. So you want to shift the conversation from what can we do to help you to what is your plan to become and remain housed. You want to have those conversations and having open conversations and really listen to what it is that they're saying. And the best tool for doing this is motivational interviewing. I did have a training on this a few weeks ago, and I plan on having another one because motivational interviewing is huge. And it's something that is extremely important for Wrappery Housing, being that this is a short-term assistance program. And you want an individual to come to their own conclusion, right? It's client-driven. You want them to come to their own conclusion, have their own goals, have their own desires, have their own motivation and commitment to change. Someone's not going to respond well if you just tell them, you need to do this. You need to do that. Hurry up and get it together. They're not going to respond well to that. But if they come to their own conclusion and realize that I want this for myself, then that's when change takes place, right? So there's some key skills with that. As I said, it's open-ended questions. Just don't ask them yes or no questions. You want them to really think about it and really talk so that you can have a conversation and guide it and see what it is that they're really saying for themselves. Affirmation, give them positive comments. We are building them up. We got the foundation. We need to work on all these other things so that we can truly build them up. They may not believe in themselves yet, so provide them with positive comments. Do reflections and rephrase what they're saying so that they can also hear what it is that they're saying. At the end of your conversations with them, kind of summarize the key points and say, okay, this is what we talked about today. This is how you feel about this. We're going to move forward with this so that they can really understand what it is that is being said and what the game plan is. And then you want to solicit change talk. You want to ask questions about the desired change. You don't want to tell them that they want to change. You want them to tell you how they want to change, how they see their lives changing, what type of life it is that they want for themselves, and then help them with figuring out the steps to get there. So it's all on them. Motivational interviewing is huge. There will be another training on that. Lastly, we're going to talk about home visits. So home visits need to be at least monthly. They're required by most, if not all, Wrappery housing funders. They're based upon their needs and the request. It does not only have to be monthly. It is based off of what someone needs. It can be weekly, it can be every 2 days, but your home visit should be focused on stabilizing housing, which is the ability to pay the rent and comply with the terms and requirements of the lease. That's the most important thing. But then you also want to work on your other goals that they may have in a stabilization plan. You want to identify and access supports, increase their income, talk about employment constantly, create an honest household and budget, provide tenancy education, what does it take to be a good tenant, and then resolve any urgent legal issues that they may have. You also want to connect them to as many community supports as quickly as possible. You want to help them with developing their problem-solving skills and resources outside of the program. You don't want to be the only support that they have, because this is temporary, right? You want them to build their network and know who to go to in certain situations when you're not there. They need to be self-sufficient and able to problem solve and say, okay, if I have an issue with my landlord and no longer have case management, if I feel like I'm being discriminated against, they know that they can contact Fair Housing. So give them those tools, put them in the right direction. Also, many community supports as possible, mental health, substance abuse, because remember that Wrappery housing is not intended to be heavy on services, but we offer services, yes, of course, but we also want to link them to community resources because we want them to be successful outside of us and after us. Examples of community connections that I've already mentioned a few. And then, of course, make sure that they know how to contact 211 for any other need that they may have. And with Wrappery housing in the short term, so knowing when to close the case. We're not solving their poverty. Instead, we're stabilizing their housing. It is not meant to be a long-term thing, but instead is meant for them to be able to bounce back. Right? They're housed. They know how to pay for their rent. They know how to abide by their lease. And they're able to make it without us. That is the goal. It is not to work on every single problem, because there's always going to be new problems that arise, but we want to get them on their feet. We want to make sure that they're able to maintain their housing and that they also have the community supports that they need for if there's any other new type of issue that arises. Performance measures, I'm going to go over this briefly. So there's 3 performance measures for Wrappery housing programs: is to reduce the length of time program participants spend homeless, which Connecticut has done great. And I used the data from last year because this year, everything's off with the pandemic. So this is a good indicator of how things are. Exit households to permanent housing, that's the goal. How many do we exit to permanent housing? And then how many return to homelessness within a year of program exits? As I said, we're at 94% and the goal is at least 85%. So Connecticut has exceeded that. I've also attached some links here so that you can check your data. ctcandata.org. It can be broken down by the CAN. It can be broken down by the organization. It's very, very detailed. It gives you a good indicator as where you stand. So always check that, and provided some links for previous webinars that we did, as well as CCH's resource page on Wrappery housing, a link to our resources, as well as recorded webinars and trainings that we have, NAEH's, their toolkit on Wrappery housing, and then Learning Collab, that is on a monthly basis that I do lead. And if you are not on my email listing and you would like to be a part of the Wrappery housing program, please email me. And that is it. That was a lot. I hope I did not go over my time, but do we have any questions? All right, so thank you.
I can't believe not anybody has any questions. I just don't believe it. I have questions. No, I'm just kidding. Great presentation. Amber was really helpful to me too. There's certain things I'm still on a learning curve with a lot of this stuff. So I really appreciate it. And I know we have a lot of new folks in the field that are just learning a lot, the rules about how to use the funds and, things like that. So I think this was really, really helpful. Thank you so much.
No problem. And this was just the overview. So we're going to break it down and go into more details during the learning collabs. So if you guys can join that, that would be great.
You're getting lots of thank yous in the chat.
Thank you for at least talking to me in the chat. Thank you.
All
I'm
right.
gonna stop my screen share. Okay.
All right. And our goal is going to try to be to get you guys out of here early, if we can. So we're going to jump right in. I'll share our screen and just give me a second. All right, so this portion of the training is about how you actually access these funds. And, there are new people and there's people that have been here a long time. And there's been a lot of changes to our system and how we do things at ACT to kind of keep up with the growth of the rapid rehousing continuum, which has, as Lee stated in the beginning and Kara, has grown exponentially over the last few years. And so we have instituted some new things. But the goal of this presentation is really to show you guys what it is that we're looking for when we get an application so that we can get these applications approved on the first shot and not have things pending and sending them back to you, which causes delay in the payments going out, which could cause disruption with your landlord relationships and client relationships. And so that's the opposite of what we want to happen. But these are not ACT's rules. These are HUD's rules and DOH's rules. And just like all of you, we have a contract that we have to follow. So this presentation is about what do you need to do to get your applications approved, okay? So we've already kind of talked about rapid rehousing, what it is and how it works. Amber did a really nice job of laying this out for us, but really we know that rapid rehousing is for literally homeless individuals who are returning to housing. That's the crux of it. And in our state, this happens through the coordinated access networks. So everybody on this call is in a different access network. And ACT's role in all of this is to be the fiduciary agent. So we do quality management for DOH, meaning we make sure that all of the HUD requirements are being met, and then we pay the bills. We cut the checks. So that is our role in all of this. ACT is a statewide nonprofit. And for those of you who are newer to the system, ACT is best known for its work in the HIV and harm reduction sector. We have been working with DOH and HOPWA agencies for many, many years and many purposes and all different kinds of populations. But our primary work up until the last few years had really been focused mostly on the HIV population. And so we've been working with HUD and DOH for various purposes over the last few years to do this rapid rehousing work. So I'm going to have Brendan jump in and start. And if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat box. And then we'll be stopping sort of throughout to answer the questions.
Okay. All right, everybody. Well, as mentioned earlier, my name is Brendan Colbert. I'm one of the rapid rehousing coordinators here at ACT. And, you know, just like Melanie said, we're going to go over RRH in a nutshell, and then we'll specifically dive into a new ticketing system, which all of you have been using for at least 2 months. Some organizations a little longer than that. So let's take it slide by slide. And a lot of this information will be repeat information that Amber may have gone over, but it doesn't hurt to go over it again. So that's what we'll do. So income. You know, what if your client doesn't have any income? What are you going to do when it comes to that?
Brendan, did we lose you? I think we lost Brendan. All right. So I guess I'll jump in and do a little bit of this while we wait for Brendan. He must be having technical difficulties. So if your client doesn't, here he comes, he's coming back. If your client does not have income, you need to submit some sort of documentation about zero income. So there is a zero income affidavit that you can fill out. This form, I believe, is available on CCH's website. It will be available on ACT's website soon. This will sort of detail when the client last had income and when they expect to start receiving income. This will also be helpful for the case managers as you're working with your client on step down and employment, and, you know, developing goals with them around their employment and income. You know, a lot of times clients feel that social security is the way to go, and they're waiting for that social security to be approved. All of us on this call who have been case managers, we know that that's not a feasible solution for income, because that could take years to happen, and rapid rehousing programs are not for years. Although we could, you know, bridge someone possibly to PSH through a CAN, that the likelihood of being able to do that is like very limited. And so we always want to encourage our clients who can work, at least even if they can only work part-time, to be sort of moving in those directions, even if they have a disability application pending, because disability doesn't mean you can never work again. We have lots of clients who are on disability but work part-time. So I just wanted to bring that up because I know we hear that a lot from clients. It's like, oh yeah, I'm not going to work because I'm waiting for my disability to be approved. Working part-time does not disqualify you for disability. So I just wanted to put that out there to everybody. Brendan, you want to take over?
Yes, my apologies, everybody. I'm having some technical difficulties, but yes.
No worries.
Yes, you know, you want to get all that information filled out and move on from there. I will take the next slide. Okay, HMIS, Homeless Management Information System. We all should be extremely familiar with this system as we use it multiple times a day. It's a local, IT system used to collect client level data. Let's go ahead and emphasize on the fact that it's an IT system used to collect data. Just, you know, full transparency, we should never be sharing any client's information via email, via text, really even via phone. If you have to call us, just give us that HMIS ID. That is why these things are created, not only to protect you as the professional, but to protect the client and their confidentiality. You know, everything that's in HMIS, if you're the one who is uploading it all into the system, you know, the social security numbers, the address, date of birth, household name, so on and so forth. All you need to do is put that into HMIS. And when you make reference to the client ID, if we need that information, it will all be there. I just wanted to emphasize that. I know we all know that, but you know, I know there's some new staff in here, and they may want to make reference to even the name, even something as simple as initials. You know, you don't have to do that. That HMIS ID, you know, will reign king or queen in this situation. So how is it used? We use it, as mentioned, to identify every aspect of the client when completing a request. You know, when you're creating an FSR, when you're doing a program enrollment, so on and so forth. So none of that identifying information needs to be put in there, because what we need, we will go ahead and find through HMIS. And if you are new to this field, HMIS will come up many, many times within this training. And as always, not sure if Melanie mentioned it, because I did have those technical difficulties, but if I'm going too fast, or if you have any questions about something, or you want me to emphasize on something, by all means, drop it in the chat, and we will go back. We have put some time in there for this very thing. Next slide, please. All right, this is my favorite slide. I even found a nice little computer image to use. Short and simple. What do I do if I am having issues with HMIS? You reach out to Nutmeg. You cut out the middleman. You go straight to Poppy. Nutmeg IT Help Desk can be reached at helpdesk@nutmegit.com. Like I said, unless you are brand new, you are familiar with submitting tickets to our system in Nutmeg. Is very similar, being the ones who created it. So if you have any issues with HMIS, any technical issues, reach out to Nutmeg. They're the ones who built it, and that's the fastest way to get your question answered. Next slide.
We have a question. Hold on.
All right, what's the question?
Hold on a minute. Just it's help@nutmegit.com.
Okay. I appreciate that, and sorry for the inconvenience to everybody.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, Tim, good looking out on that.
Nutmeg
Put this up here. We'll make sure that's fixed again.
Everybody should know that one by heart. And contrary to popular belief, we at ACT do not have any control over HMIS.
Yeah.
We can't change things. We can't, push something through. We can't assign you a role to a program enrollment. We can't do any of that. All of that has to come from Nutmeg. Although it would kind of be nice if we could, because it would make it easier for all of us, but we can't.
Next slide. Okay, let's do this. What do you need in order to cross those golden gates? So here's a list of everything possible, okay? Because of COVID, because of how our world and RRH has been for the past, past 8 months, we did list everything, but anytime you see a star or asterisk or whatever you decide to call it, just know that they are still required by HUD. So let's go down the list. And, we have specific slides for a lot of these things. So if you have specific questions, still drop it in the chat. But if it's a slide that's coming on later, I will just let you know that. Income verification, which Melanie was so gracious to help us out with. The IRS form, AKA a W-9. We're going to get into this a little later, but just let us be abundantly clear when we say the government doesn't play. So when you are requesting W-9s from the landlords or property management companies that you're working with, make sure that they are giving you the respect and your client the respect to fill out everything correctly, because all it's going to do is just unfortunately get sent back. It's not a personal thing. It's not a situation where we don't like the spelling or we want to hold anything up. Anything we do, we submit to the IRS, And if the IRS says that it is tomatoes, and you say, well, I want to spell it like tomatoes, which is a horrible example because they technically spell the same, but you guys get my drift. All the T's have to be crossed and the I's have to be dotted. What we have found is the easiest way to make sure that you're accurate is just ask that property owner or landlord to send you what the IRS sent them. So continue on verification of ownership. Currently it's not.
Hold on just a moment, Brendan. We have somebody on the line that
Okay.
is not muted. If you guys can just mute your lines, that'd be great because we got some background noise.
All right, thanks everybody. And let me be clear on this too. I don't remember saying this before. Just because something is not necessarily needed right now, but if you have access to it, throw it in the packet. It doesn't hurt. We're still going to go down our list from top to bottom, from A to Z. So, for example, the verification of ownership, a deed, any paperwork, any legal paperwork that shows that that landlord owns that property. If you have access to that, put it in the packet. Now, if you don't have access to it, it's okay for right now because of the new COVID guidelines, but it never hurts, especially if this is a landlord that you have worked with in the past prior to COVID and they're used to sending the full packet. Continue to have them do that. The client lease agreement. This is another big one. It has to be complete, it has to be full, and those T's have to be crossed and those I's have to be dotted. I don't want to use the word mistake because that's not what's happening right now. We're seeing areas of opportunity. So a huge area of opportunity that we have been seeing in regards to the lease is when you have the rental term not clearly stated. If I'm giving you, where are we going? We're in November. Okay, so if the client is moving in December and it says a 12-month lease or it says a year lease, we're still looking for that end date because that is what makes that document legal. It has to be fully filled out and it has to be signed by both the client / tenant and the property owner / landlord / property management company, whomever it is that you are working with. This is super important, everybody, because just like we mentioned before, this will hold up the initial packet. It will hold everything up because it's not right. And look at it like this. I'm just going to be perfectly frank with everybody. You're not writing the lease. So if you ask the professional that you are working with, hey, may I have a copy of my client's lease or the tenant's lease? And they hand you something, take a couple seconds, look it over. And if it's not right and you know it doesn't suffice and you know ACT is going to kick it back, tell them. There's nothing wrong with that. And I understand that. I mean this with respect. I understand maintaining relationships and keeping the landlords happy, but your first service is to your client. And you want to make sure that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted when it comes to the lease. Because as a lot of you veterans already know, you submit everything or you gather everything, you submit everything, you get we've received it. And once we get to that particular case, it's not until we're going down this list, myself, Abrika, Kendra, or Melanie, it's not until we're going down this list that we notice they never put an end date or the property manager didn't sign it. And then that holds everything up. So I don't want to say put pressure on the landlords because we don't want to create that type of environment, but make sure that whatever they're giving you is what they should be giving you.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about this when we get into specifics, but yeah. There are some scenarios where we can pay first like an initial without a signed lease because some landlords will not sign the lease without a payment.
Right.
And so we understand that.
Yeah.
So if that is the case, then once they do receive that payment and the lease is signed, it's the case manager's responsibility to make sure that they upload that signed lease into the client's file and let us know that it's there, because we do keep track of that. And if when you do go to request rent for the second month, if we don't have a signed lease, that's going to hold up your payment, because we'll only do that for the first initial, and then after that we need to have a signed lease on file.
Absolutely. VAWA, we'll get into that. Rent reasonableness, I'm not going to give a long speech, but it's the same spiel. Please fill it out to completion. Make sure everything is there, because that will also hold it up. Housing, about, let me see.
Probably the most important thing on the rent reasonableness, guys, is the zip code. If we can't read the zip code, then we can't check to make sure that it meets HUD standards on the HUD website. So make sure that the zip code for those units is legible on the rent reasonableness form.
Homeless verification. Again, I believe that there's a slide where we go into that in detail. Just know that homelessness verification has to be a separate document. It can't say, oh, well, they were enrolled in this program from this date. It's clearly in HMIS. That doesn't count. We appreciate you enrolling them in the program like you're supposed to, but it is a separate entity in a separate document. ROI, we have to have permission that we can talk. And again, I'm not being facetious. There's a whole slide on that one. I'm going to go down to the Hqs inspection form, but please know the document checklist. We always look forward to it. You guys are really, really good at putting that in there. I just want to go ahead and say that I always see that at the top. I see your checks and so on and so forth. So good job with that. The Hqs inspection form. As we know, things have changed with COVID. A lot of it is digital. Please understand that what is not digital and what has not changed is that 8th and final page. It has to say pass. It has to, or else it won't be accepted. And again, that's not ACT, that's HUD. Everybody, this is government. We have to really get down to lay down, and we have to follow the rules. A lot of you, especially the newer folks, you will follow the first 7 pages and you'll select that it passed, but on that 8th page, which is left blank on purpose, you have to write pass. So yeah, it's not a trade secret, but if you don't know, you don't know. And hopefully now, you all know now. Just remember that 8th page. Even if you have to make yourself a note, ask yourself, hey, why is this page blank? Well, it's because you have to fill it out.
Most of the inspectors who are doing the housing inspections know that HUD requires it to say that the unit passed in writing.
Mm-hmm.
Even if everything else is filled out, it still has to literally say unit passed. And we can also accept inspection forms from other entities besides HUD. So some housing authorities use a different format or whatever. That's fine too, as long as somewhere on there it says that the unit passed inspection.
Amen to that. All right, so the last 4, based on the situation, based on the location, so on and so forth, or based on the timeline, the exception form, lead form, and coastal map, and the recertification, it is based on the amount of time your client has been in the program. So like I said, we're gonna go to the next slide, but a lot of these forms, we do go in detail within the training. So we'll get to that. Any questions before we move on? I know I threw a lot at you. We're good. I'm just going to tell myself that you guys have or saving your questions for the end, because our email is always blown up. So we're going to go ahead and dive into that. IRS form, like I said, the common issues we see, some of the landlords have multiple companies. There's entrepreneurs out here, and they have multiple EINs, and whomever is running their office, or if they're running their office themselves, they may send you some information and it may not match. All is not lost. Just remind them, hey, this got sent back. Can you double check this for me? That's it. That's all you have to do. It's nothing you did, because like I said, we only process what the landlords or property management companies send us. So the most common errors are the W-9 is not signed, which is extremely important, as we know. Things have to be signed to make it official. The TIN or EIN does not match the IRS records. Now let's go ahead and dive into this very briefly. This is yet again another situation that, you know, unless you are very skilled outside of your 9 to 5, there's no way you could have known this. So when we send something back and it's a TIN mismatch or the EIN doesn't match the IRS records, we are sending that to you because that's what the feds told us. Okay, our finance department, we ran it through the IRS database and it didn't match and it got an error. So I want to set everybody straight and kind of settle your hearts and souls right now, because a lot of you may feel, hey, but I just got a message saying that this was processed and we sent it down to our finance department for payment processing, but now they're telling us that something's wrong with it. Well, what happened yesterday? What happened 2 days ago when I got this email? Nothing happened, because when it was initially processed, everything looked good. We went through all the paperwork. You knocked out the checklist from top to bottom. You killed it. And then the silent hiccup in the road, the EIN or the TIN didn't match with the database. All that means is a number may be off. You could be working with one of those entrepreneurs that have so many companies, which is a very cool thing for them, but you know, it could be a plethora of different things. So when we send something back and says, hey, we just heard back from our finance department, it's a TIN mismatch, please reach out to the landlord and let them know. Please let them know they just have to fix that. Any questions on that? All right, we can go to the next slide. Did I freeze up again? No, you still with me?
We hear you, Brendan.
Okay. Just gonna wait till we go to the next slide.
Is Mel still there, Brian?
I don't know. She may have gotten kicked off. Bear with us, everybody.
Sorry about that. I had a issue with my child.
Oh, no worries. All right, verification of ownership verifies who is the appropriate person to be paid. Simple as that. Most often, the landlords will provide a copy of the deed or an IRS form providing that they indeed own the unit that's being rented. It's extremely important that all the information lines up. The W-9 verification of ownership and the lease all have to match, because we're going to check them. I told you our job is to make sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. As mentioned, any conflicting information, it says potentially, but it will result in a delay in the processing. Even if it's ultimately found out that everything is square and you have to send documents to essentially prove that, it's going to delay. And like I said, this is nothing that you could have known. So, you know, although we want to keep good relationships with these landlords and property owners, you have to make sure that they fully understand what's going on and try to grab that information for them, and maybe even set their expectations. Hey, I understand you have a lot of companies, or whatever verbiage you choose to use. I just want to let you know that we just want to make sure that this is the correct one, because it could delay your first check coming out. You know, that may not be how you want to word it, but you want to get those hard details in it. in whatever magical way you guys choose to. All right. Leasing agreements. Shouldn't be no more or less than 1 year. I do know that things have changed since COVID. Okay, so the 1 year lease term is waived during this time, but hopefully this period in our lives will end fairly soon. So I'm just gonna go ahead and tell you what the foundation rules are versus what the COVID rules are. So the 1 year is waived during this time, but just keep in mind that it is traditionally 1 year. As mentioned before, everything needs to be signed, everything needs to line up, the name of the property, the date, start and finish, and both signatures need to be on there. All righty, next slide. VAWA. Okay, so we get this we get this question a lot. Does it just have to be women? No, VAWA can be filled out regardless of the client's gender. It is not on that list of things that needs to be in the packet right now, but it is always good to include it. So you could speak to your leadership on that, on how they want to pursue it, but I think you could put that in every packet for every landlord or property owner. Just for anybody who's 18 or over, even if they're not the head of household, regardless of their gender, like we mentioned. You want to go ahead and put that VAWA in there, but it will not hold up processing as it is on that waived form for COVID-19. Next slide, please.
Just one note on the VAWA addendum. This VAWA addendum basically restates the law in the state of Connecticut, and it's just an additional layer of protection for your clients. But this is expected of landlords regardless of having this paperwork. So that's one of the reasons why we were able to cover it under the waiver with HUD, just so you guys understand that.
Rent reasonableness.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, did you say that regardless if the landlord signs or not, it still stands? Is that what you said?
What I just said was that there are protections for domestic violence victims in place, that basically that form, all it does is restate the laws in the state of Connecticut anyways. So regardless if there's a VAWA lease addendum or not, your clients, if they are survivors of any kind of domestic violence episode, the landlords have to adhere to the law in the state of Connecticut for domestic violence victims. Having them sign that form is just an extra layer of protection for the clients.
So just ironically, about 10 minutes ago, we had a landlord's lawyer reject moving forward because they would not sign the addendum. So we can still move forward without the addendum.
Yeah, it's covered under the waiver right now, but the lawyer needs to understand that regardless if you have the addendum signed or not, if there's a domestic violence issue, they're going to have to adhere to the state law.
Okay, so we will move forward regardless. Thank you.
I would question housing somebody in that unit, though. That's just me, Tim. But I understand landlords are in short supply right now, so we got to do what we got to do.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay, rent reasonableness. 3 facts. It ensures that the government funds are put to the best use. The FMR, the fair market rate. That's why we want to make sure that it's signed, and we want to make sure, as Mel said, the correct zip code is on there and you have the right amount on there. If you don't, we will, cross-reference it with that zip code, but we would like for it to be filled out from top to bottom. It does ensure that everybody gets a fair chance. Okay, everybody gets a fair chance in high quality housing. I believe that's one of the cores of why we do what we do. And I don't know if I want to use the word favorite, but the most important point in here to me is it makes sure that there's protections in place and there's no price gouging and, oh, this is government money. Let me say this $900 1 bedroom is $1,400 because the government's good for it. No, it's not going to go down like that. That's what the reasonableness is. It wants to make sure that the rent that the government is paying is reasonable. Very simple.
So the most important things on this are the zip code and the number of bedrooms and how much the rent is. Those are the three most important items on this, because we can't determine FMR if we don't know the amount of bedrooms or the zip code that the unit is located in. If you just put New Haven, Connecticut, that's not good enough, because parts of New Haven, different zip codes have different FMRs. That goes for any city that has multiple zip codes. So just please make sure you have the zip code, the number of bedrooms, and the price that the landlord is asking for. Those are the most important things here.
Okay, yeah, I mentioned that we will go through the Hqs form, and here we are. Let's see here. Mel, does it go through all 8 pages? Okay, all right, so we'll just do an overview of it. As we mentioned before, this is the Hqs form. Needs to be filled out. As we mentioned, it doesn't necessarily have to be from a HUD inspector, but it does. We do have to have the inspection on file, and it does have to indicate at the end that the unit has passed inspections, because can't pay without that. Okay, we need to make sure that everything is okay, everything is sustainable, and we're not putting these clients in an unsafe environment or an environment that's not up to code, or a plethora of different reasons why inspection forms matter. Homelessness verification. As we mentioned before, actually need the homelessness verification. Now, I know there are some funding sources that don't need it, so on and so forth. Those agencies that work with those, we have either been in communication with you, or you have been in communication with us just to confirm that. But for the funding sources and agencies that use this, everybody else, this has to be filled out. You cannot say, well, if you look at HMIS, this person has been enrolled since January 1st, so obviously they were homeless. It's not going to fly. It never has, and it's never going to fly in the future. We need clear-cut documentation that they were actually homeless. Very simple.
So we need the third-party proof from the
Yes.
shelter or shelter provider, even if it's within your own same agency. Say you're an agency that provides rapid rehousing and you have a shelter on premise, then the shelter manager needs to write a letter stating that that person has been actively in the shelter. And the other thing is HMIS sometimes is a liar, because the data in HMIS is only as good as whatever human is entering it, and humans make mistakes. So HUD does not allow us to rely on the data in HMIS. And also sometimes you guys enter things in HMIS and then we can't see them. Has that ever happened to anybody? So we don't want to rely on HMIS for sources of all of this information, particularly when HUD has been pretty particular. The only funds that do not need this, so when the HPP funds come out, we're not going to need this for that, because it's not a homelessness fund, it's a prevention fund. And also CSSD funds, and if you don't know if you have either one of those funds, then likely you don't, and that doesn't apply to you. Those are the only two funding sources that don't need this form. Everybody else does.
And Melanie, if I can just clarify around the HMIS data, part of it is that I think some providers were sending in packets without this form completed at all, and it's not ACT's responsibility to go searching through HMIS, through the services and the program enrollments. But as long as this form is completed along with third-party documentation, like if they print out the face sheet from HMIS showing that there is a current program enrollment, or if you print out the services showing that they had stayed at the shelter up until date of program enrollment, that would be acceptable. It's more that your staff is not going to like search through all of the HMIS data. You need it in one place.
Yeah, and it should be a part of the initial packet, because if you guys don't attach it to the initial packet, then our staff has to like go and find it. We don't know what's what
Right.
necessarily. We don't know which one is the right one. They might have been in shelter multiple times, yada, yada. You get the point. So we really appreciate your assistance with that. And thanks, Lee, for clarifying.
Okay, it allows, the ROI, the release of information, it allows us to input service data and process the client's request for assistance. We need permission. We can't, walk around here like Big Sugar and do what we want. We need this documentation on file to, continue doing what we need to do. Very simple, and I'm not going to be that trainer who just talks about the areas of opportunity and doesn't give those virtual high fives when I can. So the ROI is on my list of things that the majority of you do, and you nail it every time. It's one of those things when I'm doing an initial packet. I see it, it's there, but bada bang. And we're all set. So continue to do that. And, when you bring on new staff and you onboard them, just let them know every T and every I, you know what I mean? Eventually they'll know what that means. But yeah, that's what the ROI is. We can move on to the next one. Okay, the exception form. In an event that the client has selected an apartment that is over the fair market rate, I've only been here a little under a year. I don't see too many of these. When they want something that's a little higher. What about you, Mel? Do you see
These
too
are,
many?
yeah, these are covered under the waiver right now, so we don't need these presently. But yes, we have seen quite a few of them, particularly in the southern part of the state, Fairfield County, where rents are a lot higher. We will see these in the coastal areas as well. So, guys, if you have, when the waivers are over and you guys have to do this again, it's really important that it's filled out completely. It's really important that there's a reason why you're allowing this client, and you have to be able to demonstrate that this client has the means to continue paying the rent after rapid rehousing is concluded. It needs to be signed by your internal directors, and it also needs to be approved by your contract manager. So this has to be approved by DOH. Any kind of exception to FMR has to be approved by DOH. So that's the only thing I want to say about that I think is really important, because we would get these, signed by the program managers, but then Lee and Kara would not have any clue that, this was happening. They need to be informed, and we take our direction from them. So if we need to make any exceptions, it has to come from the funder. That's all I want to say about that. Again, not needed right now, and probably a form that Brendan hasn't seen and is not familiar with. But basically this details how this client is going to remain housed after during rapid rehousing, and then after assistance is completed. It's sort of a plan. Amber went over, sort of planning with your client. And even though this isn't something that's due with your initial packet, I think it's a really good idea to be doing these things with clients, because I think it's important that they understand this isn't a permanent program, and you should be working with clients to, sort of look at their goals, whatever they are, and helping them through those action steps, whether it be employment, whether it be benefits, whether it be, I don't know. We have had clients that want to get into things that case managers are helping them fill out applications for. So this could be really anything. But, I think these are still important things to have completed with the clients, even though they're not required as a part of the initial packet. Bren?
All right, so we talked about this briefly, the document checklist. Use it. It's a document that's used to keep track of what's been completed and what has not. use it, use it, use it. Again, it's one of those virtual high fives. You guys often use it. I usually see it at the top of the initial packet. We will take a look at it. However, it's mainly for you all just to keep things in line, because regardless if the document checklist is there, we're still going to go down every list and make sure that everything that is required by HUD currently is there. So utilize the list. You know, I've never been a case manager, but you know, the type of person I am and the type of learner that I am, and I think it's a benefit. So continue to use that. Okay. Is this where we're at the chart? No, it's not it. Okay.
We're missing a document on this slide. I don't know what happened to it, but basically it's just detailing the FSR. That's all it is. So this is the FSR, or the service request rather.
Yeah. Okay. Before we move on, is there anybody who has never seen a service request before?
So I think a couple important things about the service request. Just want to make sure that you guys know that the account and the organization need to match. And so that and the payee on that form needs to match whatever we have on file for the W-9. So sometimes, you know, people will be filling out service requests and they put in the wrong address for a landlord. You might be, you know, looking at two different pieces of paper. It happens. People make errors. So just make sure that the information matches up, because we will check it and we'll have to kick it back to you if it doesn't, which we dislike doing because it makes more work for all of us. So just kind of check that before you send it in. And you'll be able to see the, you know, once the FSR has been processed, you're going to get emails. We're going to talk about our ticketing system a little bit in a minute. But I think that everybody kind of knows what an FSR is, so we don't need to spend too much time on it. Just making sure that things match up and the rental amount is the correct amount as it appears on your lease for first month's in security. And that you're filling out the form correctly. I think that's the most important part. We're not doing recertification. Oh yeah, we are doing recertifications. Yes, so every 3 months you need to send in a recertification form for your clients. So that's every 90 days that they're in housing. And if you're gonna be going over 12 months, there's, you know, there's other, you know, DOH usually needs to be notified by that. I know that during the waiver period, we are, you know, allowing more grace periods because of COVID. But, you know, your contract manager, if you have somebody that needs to be in our rapid rehousing for more than 12 months, your contract manager really should know. DOH should be notified about that. And there should be some sort of plan in place for what's going to happen after that, because there's absolutely no circumstance under which a client can be in rapid rehousing for more than 24 months, according to HUD. So there needs to be some sort of plan put in place at the 12-month mark if it looks like it's going to be an ongoing need. Sound right? Does that sound right, Lee? Okay. Just want to make sure.
It does. I was just going to say there's been some flexibility due to COVID that people can go over the 24 months, but I have not gotten any requests at this point to extend beyond the 24.
All right.
All right, now we're going to switch gears a little bit, and Abrika is going to just talk about some line items about enrollment, services, payees, references, so on and so forth. So Abrika, the floor is yours.
Yes. So as Brandon said earlier, we're just going to talk a little bit more about the service request, also known as the FSRs. So on your service request, the enrollment is the section where it should show the program that your client is enrolled in. So whatever program that is, ESG, ODFC, YHDP, you will not be able to complete a service request if your client is not enrolled in the appropriate program. So you just want to make sure that when you do complete your service request that the client is enrolled in the correct program, because if not, it can definitely cause a delay in payment and it will cause a request to be put into pending. The service is exactly what it sounds like. It's whatever service you are requesting. So if this would include security deposit, rental assistance, whatever it is, that's what the service field is for. And the payee is simply who we are paying. So that would be the landlord or the landlord or the leasing company or whoever it may be. That's who the person we are paying should be listed as the payee. And for the reference, this should tell what your FSR is for. For example, if you're submitting for April's first month's rent, the name of that FSR should be April's first month's rent. It just makes it easier when we have to go on the back end and we have to go and release the FSR. If we know exactly what we're looking for, it's easier for us to find it versus, you know, it can be very confusing when we're trying to look for the service request and it doesn't really specify what it's for. It can cause confusion with us. So that's pretty much it for service requests. I just wanted to add in, be sure that your client is just enrolled into the correct program as stated before, because I have placed requests into pending because what we've been finding is that on FSRs, the account name and the provider are different. Those two have to be identical or they have to match. If it's not identical or it doesn't match when we're trying to retrieve the FSR, we won't be able to find it. And I know that this can cause delays with case managers when you guys are trying to close out your enrollments and things like that. And also with FSRs, I just wanted to reiterate that you need to submit an FSR and a funds request. I've been finding lately that case managers have been submitting the funds request, but no service request. We need both. We need both the funds request and we need the service request. The service request is extremely important because this is the document that we give to our finance department. And this is how they are able to pay the rent. This is how we pay the rent. This is how we know who's supposed to be receiving the rent, how much the rent is for. This form is very, very important. So we need both the service request and the funds request. Any questions about that? Okay, we can go to the next slide now. So after documentation is collected, all initial requests should be sent to the community_assistance@act-ct.org. Any questions regarding just Wrappery Rehousing in general should be emailed to our funds email. Anything that is regarding a ticket should be sent to the community_assistance email. And be sure that when you are sending in tickets, be sure that in the subject line that you specify the HMIS ID and you also specify the type of request it's for. If you send in a ticket and it does not contain the HMIS ID, it will be rejected. If it doesn't specify what the request is, if it's a arrearage first month's rent ongoing, it will be rejected because we wouldn't know what we're looking for. So just be sure that when you are sending in tickets, just double check to make sure that all the information that is required is in the subject line of that email. And also when you send in an initial request, the first month's rent and the security deposit should all be together in one ticket. Sometimes we'll get a ticket for a security deposit and then we'll receive another ticket for the first month's rent. If this is for an initial request, everything should just be sent in together. That way it makes it easier when we are looking over the paperwork. Next slide now. Just important fields to reiterate: the reference date, the date the service request is referring to, the due date, which is usually the first of the month. The unit quantity is very important. It should always be one unless the landlord is requesting 2 months worth of security deposit, then it would be 2. But other than that, it should always be 1. And the unit amount is the amount of what the case manager is requesting. So that would be the amount of the rent or the first month's rent, or even I know we also review utility requests, so whatever the amount of the utility request would be, that would go under the unit amount. And these are all the fields that are on the FSR. Any questions? Okay. Once you send in a request, everything is updated in real time. And so these are the 3 statuses that you will receive once we do receive your request. Once you send in your ticket and your ticket is assigned to a staff member, once we look over everything is processed and everything looks good, it will be approved. If any little thing is missing, such as like a signature or paperwork, any of the required paperwork, or if there's a 10 mismatch, it will be put into pending. The request will be put into pending, and the case manager will also receive an email detailing why that request is into pending. We will also include what we need. So like I said, whatever documentation that is, we'll let you know what we're missing. And rejected will be requests that are incorrectly submitted. Any request that's incorrectly submitted for anything will be rejected. So you should see approved, pending, or rejected. And next slide. Okay, is this still me, Brian?
Well, you're doing such a good job, but my Kool-Aid and candy break is over, so I can take over from here. And yes, everybody, I really said that because it's true. All right, let's talk details. So on top of what Abrika said, you want to make sure that you're submitting the recurring requests for assistance to the correct email address. And I know a lot of you were on our trainings over the past few months for the new ticketing system. However, just to say it one more time, doesn't hurt to say it again. The email address to go to our ticketing system is community_assistance@act-ct.org. It will go directly to our ticketing system. What will happen is the very next slide, but I just want to make sure, I wanted to do an individual slide letting you all know that that's the email address. And you want to make sure that these requests are submitted before the 20th of every month, just to ensure that all the payments for rent for the following months are out on time. And this really speaks to everything we've been talking about for the past half an hour. Think of all of those things that you can't possibly know about, like if the 10 is going to match, if the W-9 is going to pull up in the database correctly. So we say the 20th to give yourself that room. And everything, you know, we did our very best to make sure everything stayed in order with the old way of doing things, but the system makes sure that everything stays in order with this new way of doing things. So, you know, what do I mean when I say that? Is it the 20th? Okay, so next week is the 20th. Can't believe it. You send in December's 2020 rent on November 20th. It gets assigned. You know, I process it, Abrika processes it, and it sits there. But the system will know that this was done first. We do everything on a first come, first serve basis, provided that there are no errors. So, a lot of you may say, well, I sent it in on the 20th and I didn't hear back, or it wasn't finished until the 3rd of the month. You run into those situations when there's a lack of communication, when there is something missing, when the landlord or the property management company gave you incorrect information. So there's a plethora of different reasons, but just know our ticketing system is just like nutmegs. And, depending on how you feel about that, I personally think it's a good thing, but nevertheless, it does keep everything in order. That's one thing we can't guarantee. So let's go ahead and get into the ticketing system, the details about that. You can never do this training too many times, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, submitting applications. This started officially October of this year. It started a little bit earlier for that, for some pilot agencies that we were working with. And, we want to make sure that we are submitting one HMIS ID per email. Now, just to tap into what Abrika said a little bit, when you're submitting initial requests and you have a December security deposit and a December 1st month's rent, you want to put that in that first submission. So everything is paid the same time. We make sure that all the documents are where they're supposed to be, so on and so forth. That's extremely important. Please just submit one. The email address we already went over. And the subject line, this is extremely important. You have to put the HMIS ID plus the type of application it is, initial, ongoing, or recertification, plus the month of assistance. If you don't put it in this order, it will be rejected. And it gets rejected not because we're big meanies and we want to make things harder for you. We now have an automated system in the ticketing system, and we have distributors who send certain things out to certain people. So we may have a team member who only does recertification. We may have another team member who only does initials. So you have to, essentially put it in the correct format. Before anybody even touches anything, you'll receive an email confirmation saying that your submission has been received and you'll be assigned a ticket number. This happens before any of the dispatchers even touch anything, okay? Then what happens is there are 3 shifts a day for ticket assignments. So the first one I do at crack of dawn is 7 o'clock in the morning. So those are all the ones from when you, the final hours of work, or if you were working late, I will see those first thing in the morning. The second shift is about 12:30 after lunchtime, okay? So any ones that you submitted that same day or some point in the morning, they get assigned. And then there's a final shift around 3:30 p.m. just to make sure that we didn't miss anything for the day. And what happens is you'll receive an email stating who your submission has been assigned to, so you'll know whomever it is that's working on your file. Okay, we can go to the next slide. All right, let's talk about what everything means. So if everything is approved, that means it has no errors. That means everything is okay. We can continue to process. We can do everything we need to do and send it down to our finance department for payment processing. That verbiage probably sounds extremely familiar to a lot of you because that's exactly what it says in the automated message. Pending. Pending does not mean all is lost. Pending means it can be saved. There's something about this issue, whatever that issue is, that can be saved. It can be a lot of things. You forgot to add something on the rent reasonableness. You forgot to upload the 8th page of the Hqs form. Things like that. Things that can be fixed. And rejected. Rejected means it can't be fixed. Doesn't mean that all is lost, but it means this particular submission needs to be redone. The most common error of a rejected application is the subject line not being correct. And I'm just going to be frank with all you. When the subject line is not correct, it gets rejected. It automatically gets rejected because we don't know how to proceed. We don't know who you're talking about. We don't know what month you're talking about, and we don't know whom it is we should assign it to because we don't know what type of application it is. So you'll receive an email stating exactly why it's rejected. We're not going to leave you out there, but you'll know exactly why it's rejected. And going forward from that, you'll know exactly what to do.
And Brent, I just wanted to add in, if anytime there's a request that is pending for whatever reason, once case managers receive that email that the request is pending, when you guys respond back, just be sure that when you respond back, you're responding back to the original ticket, because you guys will respond back to the automated message and it'll end up creating a new ticket. So now there will be multiple tickets for one HMISD client.
Yes, correct. That automated message.
Don't create a new email to the system to tell
Right.
us that it's done either, because then it goes to the bottom of the pile and we don't know that it's associated with that same HMIS ID until we assign it, and then it causes confusion for us. So if you can respond, if you don't have the ticket number or you deleted it for some reason or it's not in your inbox, send us an email to the funds@act-ct.org and we'll give you the ticket number.
Yep.
Because sometimes you guys have multiple emails, and I know, we'd be blowing up your inbox with all these statuses now. So it might be hard to keep track of all that. So if you're wondering what the ticket number was, you can always email us at ACT Funds and we'll respond to you. We have it.
Next slide. Oh, we're on the next slide. All right, so let's dive a little bit deeper into what it means when something is pending. We talked about a lot of this. The only thing we didn't talk about is you're going to receive an email every single 48 hours on the nose until the information that we've requested from you has been received. We're not sending this email; it's an automatic email. So until we update the status, you're going to continue to do that. And again, it's not to bug you; it's to remind you.
And if you don't tell us that it was done, we can't go in and look for it. So please make sure that you reach out to us and let us know, because HMIS does not alert us, unfortunately, when something has been updated in a client file. So we have no way of knowing to circle back to that unless you notify us. So make sure you respond to the email and just let us know that, whatever piece of information was missing has been completed, so that we can move your application through the next phase of the process.
All right, next slide.
Rika, did you want to say something on this?
Oh yeah, I wanted to say if sorry, I think it was on the tip of my tongue and I just had a brain fart. Sorry.
It's okay. All right, final steps.
All right, if everything is good, if everything is perfect, if everything is flawless, as mentioned, you'll get the automated message about getting sent down to our finance department, and finance will review all of the documentation. If everything is good, they're going to go ahead and cut the check. Once the payments are made, you'll receive an email stating that the ticket has been closed and the check has been cut. Okay. We will do our very best to upload the checks and release at the same time, but focus on that email saying that it has at least been done and mailed out.
So Kendra is going to take on this
Yep.
next portion. So for those of you who are more visual, this is a visual representation of an initial request. Kendra, do you want to jump in, honey?
Yep, got it.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone. So the next few slides are actually going to be just explaining what Brenda just spoke about. So the process, it should look like this. So ideally, it takes 5 business days for a ticket to be closed out. First, the case manager, you would have to email the community assistance at act-ct.org, the email address that we provided earlier. The subject line should have the HMIS ID plus what type of application it is. That means initial, ongoing, if it's a recert, and what month it's for. So just like both said before, so let's say that we have an initial and you're paying the next security and the first month rent. In that subject line, it should have exactly that, not 3 different tickets. Once you have submitted this ticket through the email, you should get a first initial email that states submission received. You might not get a response right away, but just wait for that. Next, what would happen is they would get assigned to one of our team members. Brendan goes in and assigns them. There's a shift in the morning and one at 12, like he said before. Let's say in a perfect world, this application, we reviewed it, nothing's wrong with it. It gets submitted to our finance department, which goes and verifies the TIN. The TIN is the tax ID number. For new vendors, we would check that. Once that's verified that everything's good with that, you would get a response that says submission with finance. If everything looks good on that, then you would get another email that says check cut. That means the check was uploaded into HMIS, and that usually takes no more than 5 business days. That will be up, and the FSR will be released. So let's say that somebody submitted a ticket and we're reviewing it and it's incomplete. It's missing the rent reasonableness and let's just say the rent reasonableness. So we would then send it back to a pending status. You will get an email that says this submission is pending, and we would say why. We wouldn't just say it's pending. You would know exactly why, and then that's your job to go either contact the landlord or get that paperwork filled out and upload it onto HMIS. We don't know when you upload it onto HMIS until you tell us. So we will be waiting for a response back. Hey, I uploaded the form. Please let me know if this suffices. So once we review that and everything looks good, then it would go into that status submission with finance. And then everything looks good, just like I said before with the 10, then it would be check cut. Once everything is good, the check has been mailed and the FSR will be released. And so that's pretty much that for the initial process workflow. The ongoing one is almost the same. We just really won't be needing to review the 10. So you would submit the ticket. You would say subject line HMIS. This is a November ongoing rent. And let's say it is a recert. So pretty much you would put that in the subject line. We would review it. Research, we keep track of that. That's every 90 days. We would review that. Everything looks good. Same process. It goes to the finance department that reviews it, and the check is cut and mailed. And then we would update that on the ticketing system, and you get an email that says check cut.
The only exception to ongoing requests that we would need something different is if a building owner transfers their property to another building owner. So if a client is living in a unit and the property owner sells the building or transfers ownership to another entity, we need another initial application. So we're going to need to see everything all over again. Rent reasonableness, we're going to need to see the lease, we're going to need to see the W-9 for the new property owner. And also, if a client, this has happened a couple of times too, if a check gets returned to us by a landlord because either it wasn't mailed to the proper address because the FSR was filled out incorrectly and we didn't catch it, or if it was returned because the post office it was undeliverable, we will attempt to verify the address and we will attempt to resend that check. If it gets returned to us more than once, we are then going to ask the provider to come and make arrangements to pick up the check and hand deliver it to the landlord, or have the landlord come directly to our offices to pick it up. Because every time we have to stop payment on checks and reissue checks, it causes issues for us internally, and that's kind of just, we don't want to waste resources and we don't want to waste time trying to send things to people multiple times and not getting results. So that has happened a few times. But the good news is with check mailing is that in December, all of your landlords are going to be receiving a letter from us and some paperwork regarding direct deposit. We are going to be starting to offer that after the first of the year. We're hoping for January. It might take to February. We all know how new systems work. Sometimes we get things done easier than others. However, the benefit of that is that a landlord is never going to have to wait for a check to be mailed. And we don't want case managers sort of doing that. That's going to be all between the landlord and ACT. So we will make the forms available on our website, and we will ask landlords to fill out the paperwork and deliver it directly to ACT via mail. The reason for that is just because of security. I mean, these landlords are going to be giving bank account and routing information to their bank account, and we kind of don't want that floating all over the place. So most landlords aren't going to want to give that to a case manager anyway. So we will do that work for you. And if a landlord is interested in it, we'll be able to direct you to our website at that time to have them access the paperwork. Does that make sense? Isn't that exciting news? No more paper checks. Nothing can get lost in the mail, and it'll always be on time. As long as your application is on time, the payment will be on time. So we won't have to worry about late fees. That's exciting. Okay.
Okay, special considerations during COVID. Brendan kind of went over this a little bit, but this is all the paperwork that we would need for an initial lease up until the state of Connecticut lifts the Declaration of Public Health and Civil Preparedness Emergency enacted by our mayor, Governor Lamont, on March 10, 2020. These are the paperwork that's going to be required. So we have the funds request checklist, homeless verification, Hqs Inspection Form, the coastal community map that's going to be needed for people who are in the coastal community. Reasonableness checklist, lead disclosure, lease, W-9, YHDP, date of birth documentation, complete program enrollment in HMIS, statewide ESG, emergency rapid exit, complete financial service requests. In an event that you guys are working from home for your agency, they are allowing electric signatures to be acceptable during this time.
Great. Thanks, Kendra.
Another special consideration during COVID, the exception forms for clients that are nearing 1 year program enrollment anniversary. Providers will not need to submit an exception form to continue to serve the household with income at or below 50% AMI beyond 12 months. However, HUD continues to require that annual assessment based on the program enrollment date be completed in HMIS, and that the annual Hqs inspection be conducted for clients who are receiving rental assistance beyond that.
So as part of your recertification at the 12-month mark, you're going to need to make sure that you are submitting those new forms to us. We will ask you for them. If they're not present, it will delay your application if it's not uploaded.
Yep.
So this is us. Here's all of our information. And there's one thing that was not a part of this presentation, but I think is worth talking about. And this is our frequently asked questions. So we get a lot of questions about this ticketing system, and I just want to kind of go over a few things with you guys. So for example, one of the things that happens quite frequently is somebody will send us an application, or at least they think they do, and then they never hear anything back from us. And then they email us 2 months later saying this landlord is, reaching out to us. They need help. They didn't receive their payment. So my first question then is, did you receive any notification from us that we receive your application? And if the answer is no, then that means we didn't get it. So if you don't immediately within 20 to 30 minutes after sending a application receive a response from us that we have received it, then we don't have it. If you receive something that says we've gotten your application and then you don't hear anything from us for a few days, please contact us and ask us what the status is on that application by responding to the original email that you received. You should be receiving status updates every time the application moves into a new phase in the process. So if you're not receiving status updates, please contact us. Let us know that you don't know what's going on. If a landlord tells you that they don't receive a check, we are going to ask that you go into HMIS and look it up, because there's very likely a check number or a check uploaded into that client's file. If you don't find a check uploaded in that client's file, then we will check on it with our finance department. If you do find a check uploaded, just reference the check number for us so that we can see whether or not it's been cashed. If a landlord says they didn't receive a check, but the check has been cashed, there is nothing that ACT can do about that. We can't stop payment after something's already been cashed. We can't claw back funds after something's been cashed. A landlord is going to need to contact the fraud department at their bank if a check that is made out to them was cashed by somebody else. What we can do in that instance is provide you copies of the canceled check that the landlord can use to file their fraud claim with their bank. Okay. The banks, once the money leaves our account, they don't want to deal with us anymore. They want to deal with the payee. So there's really not much we can do in those instances. And a lot of landlords don't know that unless it's happened to them. Another issue that sometimes, if the check is not cashed and the landlord says they haven't received it, we can reissue the check, and we will do that at least once, but not more than twice. If a landlord continues to say they're not receiving it, then we're going to require that somebody from your organization or the landlord themselves come to physically pick up the payment. It just costs us too much money to reissue checks, and we just can't do that perpetually. So we will do it at least once, but not more than twice. The last thing that I just wanted to mention to you guys was that, our goal at ACT, and I know it's been a little bit rough for the last few months as we've been transitioning into this new system. Our goal is to make things easier for all the providers to do their jobs. We never want to make things harder for you, but please understand we have over 100, sometimes 200 applications that we're seeing in a week. And so we appreciate you guys being patient with us, and we process over 1,000 applications for assistance a month. So even if we make one mistake or two mistakes or three mistakes, we're still like 99% accurate. But if it's your client who we made an error with, then it's going to affect your client. It's going to affect that client's relationship. If that happens, we will write a letter for you. We'll do whatever we can. Feel free to blame us. Tell the landlords, they know how the state works. That darn state, we just can't reach out to landlords without client permission. And so anytime somebody asks us, well, can you reach out to this landlord? The answer is we really can't. We don't have authorization. If a landlord reaches out to us because they got a check and they're not sure who it applies to, then we are probably going to contact you, and we're going to ask you to reach out to that landlord yourselves. We count on a partnership with all of you in order for this system to work effectively. And that is our goal, is to partner with you. And so, let's be partners. Let's work together. I know you guys are really busy. I was a case manager in the field for a lot of years, so I can appreciate that. But really, when it comes to these applications, the onus is on the case manager to make sure that each step of the process happens. And if you think something seems not correct, or we might have missed something, please feel free to reach out to us. We are so open to having communication with you. Communication is a key component of this, and that's why we have instituted this ticketing system. And I think October was a little rough. November has seemed to go much better. So I do appreciate everybody's patience as we're instituting these new processes. And I want to thank everybody who took time out of their day to be here today. Just any final questions before we end the meeting?
I have a question. Hi, this is Olivia for New Opportunity.
Hi, Olivia.
Hi. My question is: Is possible the check being mailed before they be posted on HMIS? For
Yes.
example, I'm so sorry. For example, I saw that one of my client check, it was made 11/3, but it was posted on HMIS around the 9th.
Yeah,
Or it was the 8th.
we usually ask for about 5 business days to give us a chance to upload all the checks and release the FSR.
Okay. All right.
So
Thank
there
you.
is a chance that the check could be posted and mailed prior to it appearing in HMIS, because that is
Okay.
it's a manual procedure that we have to perform. And when you're doing 200 of them a week, sometimes we get a little backed up, but we try to do our best.
Yeah,
Kendra,
because I'm sorry.
Kendra is great. She'll if you have any questions, you can email her directly and she'll be able to tell you whether or not it's pending being uploaded. She has all that information.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we're getting a lot of thank yous in the chat box. Any other questions before we end the session? Going once, going twice. All right, guys, thank you so much for giving us your time today. If I could just ask CCH and ACT to stay on the call for just a minute. We're going to have people start logging off. Thank you again for being here. We appreciate all of the work that you're doing. And we hope you all have a great rest of your week.